Sergeant Amira Cole's earpiece went dead during what should have been a routine operation, and when the police helicopter descended toward her position near the Los Angeles docks, she thought backup had arrived. But the two officers who dragged her aboard in handcuffs weren't there to help. Manipulated by hijacked radio frequencies and false commands, they believed they were apprehending a cop killer. And as the aircraft climbed higher over the churning ocean with storm clouds gathering on the horizon, one of them made a choice that would haunt him forever. They shoved her out at 3,000 feet. What Lieutenant Ryan Hale and his corrupt network didn't know was that Amira Cole had survived worse than falling from the sky, and the woman they thought they'd killed was about to become the weapon that destroyed everything they'd built. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun painted Los Angeles in shades of gold and amber, the kind of beautiful start to a day that made people forget the city could be dangerous. High above the sprawling urban landscape, a police helicopter cut through the clear air, its blades chopping rhythmically as it tracked a vehicle weaving through downtown traffic below. Inside the cockpit, Officer Jake Daniels leaned forward in his seat, eyes fixed on the black sedan that had been flagged 20 minutes earlier. Dispatch, this is Air 7. Still maintaining visual on the suspect vehicle. Heading eastbound on 6th Street, Daniels said into his headset, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. His partner, Officer Marcus Webb, sat beside him, one hand on the controls, the other adjusting the helicopter's camera to keep the car centered on their monitor. Webb was a veteran pilot with 15 years under his belt, and his calm demeanor helped keep Daniels grounded during high-pressure situations like this one. Copy that, Air 7. Units are moving to intercept at the next junction. The dispatcher's voice crackled through their headsets. It was supposed to be routine. A stolen vehicle, maybe a drug runner, nothing they hadn't handled dozens of times before. But then the radio crackled again, this time with an urgency that made both officers straighten in their seats. All units be advised. New information on the suspect. Armed female, possibly involved in the warehouse shooting on Harbor Boulevard. Consider extremely dangerous. Repeat, suspect is armed and extremely dangerous. Daniels felt his stomach tighten. A warehouse shooting changed everything. That meant casualties, maybe cops down, maybe civilians caught in the crossfire. His hand instinctively moved closer to his sidearm. Did they say female? Webb asked, banking the helicopter slightly to maintain their angle. That's what I heard, Daniels confirmed, scanning the streets below with renewed intensity. Down on the ground, near the Los Angeles River docks, Sergeant Amira Cole crouched behind a rusted shipping container, her eyes scanning the warehouse complex ahead. She wore a green tactical cargo uniform, standard issue for undercover operations, and her body was coiled with the tension of someone who'd spent years learning to trust her instincts. Those instincts were screaming at her right now. The operation had been clean until 5 minutes ago. Her earpiece had been feeding her constant updates from Homeland Security headquarters, guiding her movements as she tracked a suspected arms dealer through the maze of industrial buildings. Then, without warning, the connection went dead. Just static, then nothing. Amira tapped her earpiece twice, the signal to request a communication check. Silence. She tried her backup frequency. Still nothing. Her jaw clenched. Losing communication during an active operation was more than inconvenient. It was potentially lethal. She pulled out her phone, keeping low behind the container, and tried to send a text to her handler. The message failed to send. Something was jamming her signals, and that meant someone knew she was here. Above her, though she couldn't hear it, yet over the ambient noise of the docks, the police helicopter was changing course. Webb had spotted something on the thermal camera. Hold on, I've got a heat signature near the river docks. Single person, looks like they're in tactical gear, Webb said, adjusting their trajectory. Could be our suspect, Daniels replied, leaning closer to the monitor. Dispatch, we have a possible visual on a suspect matching the description near the dock warehouses. Green uniform, appears to be alone. Copy, Air 7. Proceed with caution. Ground units are 10 minutes out. The helicopter descended, its shadow growing larger on the concrete below. Amira heard it now, the distinctive thump of rotor blades getting closer. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun, and saw the LAPD markings on the aircraft. Confusion flickered across her face. Why were they here? This was a federal operation. Local police shouldn't even know about it. She stood slowly, keeping her hands visible, and reached for her badge. It was clipped inside her jacket, a habit from her undercover work. She needed to signal them, let them know she was law enforcement. But Webb and Daniels saw something different from their vantage point. They saw a figure in tactical gear, same build as described, same green uniform, standing in an area that matched the location where the armed suspect was last seen. The pieces fit too perfectly for them to question. "That's her," Daniels said, his voice tight. "Has to be." The helicopter descended rapidly, kicking up dust and debris. Webb brought them down to about 30 feet, close enough that their loudspeaker would be heard clearly. "This is the LAPD. Get on the ground now. Hands where we can see them." Daniels shouted into the mic, his voice booming from the helicopter speakers. Amira's eyes widened. They thought she was a suspect. She raised her hands higher, trying to reach for her badge, but from above it looked like she was reaching for a weapon. "She's going for something." Webb shouted. "I said get on the ground." Daniels repeated, his hand now on his weapon. Amira tried to shout back, but her voice was lost in the roar of the helicopter. She slowly, carefully opened her jacket to show her badge, but the wind from the rotors whipped her jacket back around her body. Nothing was going right. Webb set the helicopter down in a nearby clearing, the skids touching concrete with a slight bounce. Daniels jumped out before they'd fully landed, his weapon drawn but pointed at the ground, his partner right behind him after securing the controls. "On the ground. Now!" Daniels yelled again, running toward her. Amira dropped to her knees, hands still raised. "I'm Federal. Homeland Security. Check your dispatch. I'm on an active operation." But Daniels wasn't listening. He'd been told there was an armed and dangerous suspect, possibly a cop killer, and she matched every detail they'd been given. He grabbed her shoulder, forcing her down onto her stomach, and yanked her arms behind her back. The metal cuffs clicked around her wrists with cold finality. "I'm telling you, I'm an agent. My name is Sergeant Amira Cole, badge number 9824, she said, keeping her voice as calm as she could manage. Panic wouldn't help. These officers thought they were doing their job. "Yeah, right," Webb said, standing over her as Daniels patted her down. "And I'm the mayor. Tell it to the station. Check the comms. Headquarters will confirm my identity. Just call it in." Amira insisted. Daniels found her service weapon, a Glock 19, and removed it from her holster. He also found her backup piece, a small knife strapped to her ankle, and her phone. He held up the items to Webb. Armed, just like they said, Daniels confirmed. They hauled her to her feet and dragged her toward the helicopter. Amira didn't resist. She'd been trained for situations like this, though she'd never imagined she'd be on this side of a mistaken arrest. The key was to stay calm, stay rational, and trust the system to correct itself. Webb climbed back into the pilot's seat while Daniel secured Amira in the back, her cuffed hands making it difficult to sit comfortably. The helicopter lifted off again, rising quickly above the docks. "Dispatch, Air 7. We have the suspect in custody. Female, green tactical gear, was armed. Heading back to base," Webb reported. There was a pause on the radio, longer than normal. When the voice came back, it sounded different. Amira's trained ear caught it immediately. The tone was wrong, the cadence slightly off. "Copy that, Air 7. Suspect is confirmed armed and dangerous. Possible decoy for larger operation. Handle with extreme caution. Do not let her communicate." Daniels glanced at Amira through the gap between the seats. "Hear that? You can drop the act." "That wasn't dispatch," Amira said firmly. "Listen to frequency. That's not the right channel." "Sure it's not," Daniels said sarcastically. He'd heard suspects try every trick in the book, and this was just another one. Some of them were surprisingly creative. But Amira's attention was fixed on the radio panel she could partially see from her position. The frequency display was visible, and the numbers were wrong. It wasn't the LAPD dispatch frequency. Someone was broadcasting on a hijacked channel, feeding these officers false information. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't a simple mistaken arrest anymore. Someone had deliberately engineered this, someone with the technical capability to intercept and redirect police communications. That level of sophistication pointed to something much bigger than a random criminal operation. "You need to listen to me," Amira said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "Your radio has been compromised. Someone is feeding you false information. I'm a Homeland Security agent on an undercover operation, and whoever hijacked your frequency knows that." "Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but—" Daniel started. "Check the frequency." Amira snapped. "Look at your display. What channel are you on?" Webb glanced down at the radio, frowning. "That's weird. This isn't our normal dispatch channel. See? Someone rerouted your communications. They wanted you to pick me up, and they wanted me isolated," Amira explained quickly. Daniels shook his head. "Or you're just a really good liar trying to mess with our heads." The radio crackled again. That same wrong voice. "Air 7, be advised. Suspect has compromised the mission. Multiple agents down. If she poses a threat to your safety, you are authorized to use necessary force. Repeat, terminate if necessary." Amira's blood ran cold. Terminate. They were being given an execution order masked as self-defense authorization. "Did he just say what I think he said?" Webb asked, his voice uncertain. "That's not protocol," Daniels said slowly, but Amira could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. The helicopter banked sharply, and Amira realized they were heading away from the city, out toward the ocean. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, and the wind was picking up, causing the aircraft to shudder slightly. "Where are we going?" "This isn't the route back to base," Amira said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "New orders," Webb said, though he sounded unsure. "We're supposed to secure the suspect away from populated areas." Amira understood immediately. They were taking her somewhere remote, somewhere without witnesses. Whoever was controlling this operation wanted her dead, and they were using these officers as unwitting executioners. "They're setting you up," Amira said urgently. "Think about it. Since when does dispatch order you to take a suspect out over the ocean? Since when do they use the word terminate for anything other than ending a vehicle pursuit?" Daniels was quiet, but his hand tightened on his weapon. Webb kept flying, but his jaw was clenched, his knuckles white on the controls. The storm clouds were closer now, and the first drops of rain began to pelt the helicopter's windscreen. Lightning flickered in the distance, and thunder rumbled through the sky. The atmosphere inside the aircraft was nearly as charged as the weather outside. "Even if what you're saying is true, we can't just let you go," Daniels finally said. "We have our orders." "Your orders are coming from someone who wants me dead," Amira replied. "And when this is over, when they realize what you've done, do you think they'll protect you? You'll be the fall guys for a murder." Webb's hand hovered over the radio controls. "Maybe we should call in, verify." The radio squawked before he could finish. "Air 7, do not attempt to contact dispatch. Communication protocols have been compromised. Proceed with previous orders immediately." It was too convenient, too perfectly timed. Webb and Daniels exchanged a look, and in that moment, Amira saw the realization dawning on their faces. Something was very wrong with this situation. But before anyone could speak, turbulence rocked the helicopter violently. Webb fought with the controls as wind shear pushed them sideways. The storm was arriving faster than expected, and they were caught in its path. Amira braced herself as best she could with her hands cuffed behind her back. Through the open side door, she could see the ocean churning below, dark and unforgiving. The helicopter tilted, and she slid toward the opening. "Stabilize," Webb shouted, pulling hard on the controls. Daniels grabbed a handhold, his other hand reaching out instinctively, but not toward Amira. He was holding onto his own safety as the aircraft bucked and swayed. The radio voice came through one more time, calm and cold despite the chaos. "Suspect poses immediate threat. Eliminate the problem, Air 7. That's a direct order." And in that moment of panic, fear, and confusion, with the storm raging around them and a voice of authority commanding them, Daniels made a choice he would regret for the rest of his life. He moved toward Amira, his face twisted with stress and uncertainty. "I'm sorry," he said, and he shoved her toward the open door. Time seemed to slow. Amira felt the push, felt her body leave the helicopter, felt the wind tear at her clothes and hair. But her eyes remained calm, focused, trained. As she fell into the storm, tumbling through rain and thunder, she whispered words that were lost to the wind but burned with absolute certainty. "You picked the wrong soldier." 3 years earlier, Amira Cole stood in the cargo hold of a C-130 aircraft, 30,000 feet above the Nevada desert. Around her, 5 other trainees checked their gear with practiced precision, but none of them carried parachutes. This was the final test of their advanced tactical training. Halo insertion without standard safety equipment. The instructor, a grizzled Special Forces veteran named Master Sergeant Phillips, walked down the line, inspecting each trainee with eyes that missed nothing. When he reached Amira, he stopped. "Cole, you ready for this?" he asked. "Yes, Sergeant," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. "This drill separates the soldiers from the survivors," Phillips said. "When you're behind enemy lines, when everything goes wrong, when you're falling and there's no one coming to save you, what do? You save yourself, Sergeant." Phillips almost smiled. "Damn right you do." The cargo door opened, and the howl of wind at altitude filled the hold. One by one, the trainees jumped, each carrying only emergency deployment cords hidden in their gear, each trusting in their training and their ability to adapt under extreme pressure. When Amira's turn came, she didn't hesitate. She jumped into the sky, and for those terrifying, exhilarating seconds, she learned what it meant to fall with purpose. Back in the present, as Amira tumbled through the storm toward the churning ocean, muscle memory took over. Her mind, instead of panicking, calculated. Wind speed, rotation, altitude based on air pressure, the rate of her descent. Her hands, cuffed behind her back, twisted against the metal restraints, feeling for the hidden strap inside her right boot. The helicopter was already distant above her, a dark shape disappearing into the clouds. Rain pelted her face, and thunder cracked so close she felt in her chest. She was spinning, the world a blur of gray sky and black water, but her fingers found what they were searching for. The strap was thin but strong, exactly where she'd sewn it during her last equipment inspection. It was against regulation to carry unauthorized gear, but Amira had learned that rules were written by people who'd never been thrown out of a helicopter. She pulled hard, and the hidden deployment cord released. The emergency chute wasn't like a standard parachute. It was smaller, designed for rapid deployment at low altitude, meant to slow a fall just enough to make survival possible rather than guaranteed. It unfurled with a sharp crack that Amira felt through her entire body, jerking her violently upward relative to her fall, though she was still plummeting downward. Her descent slowed from fatal to merely devastating. She could see the marshland now, rushing up to meet her, a sprawl of mud and reeds at the edge of the industrial coastline. She had maybe 3 seconds to prepare for impact. Amira pulled her knees up, trying to protect her core, and twisted her body to avoid landing flat. The cuffs bit into her wrists as she strained against them, and she felt something give way. Not the cuffs themselves, but the chain connecting them, stressed beyond its limit by the forces of her fall. She hit the marsh hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs and sending a shock of pain through her left side. Mud and water exploded around her as she plowed into the soft ground, her body carving a trench before finally stopping. For a moment, she just lay there, stunned, her ears ringing and her vision swimming. Then training kicked in again. Check for injuries. Assess the situation. Keep moving. Amira rolled on her back, gasping for air. Her hands are still cuffed, but the chain had snapped during her fall, probably caught on something during impact. Her left wrist was bleeding where the metal had cut into her skin, and her right was bruised but free enough to move independently now. She sat up slowly, testing her limbs. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken. The emergency chute had tangled around her legs, and she kicked free of it, leaving it half buried in the mud. Someone might find it eventually, but by then it wouldn't matter. Above her, the storm continued its assault, rain turning the marsh into a slick, treacherous landscape. Amira got to her feet, swaying slightly, and looked around. Industrial buildings lined the shore in the distance, maybe half a mile away. She started walking, each step a small victory against pain and exhaustion. In a helicopter, Webb had turned them back toward the city, fighting the storm controls every inch of the way. Daniels sat in stunned silence, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. The radio had gone quiet after Amira fell. No more instructions, no more orders. "We need to report this," Webb finally said, his voice hollow. Daniels nodded numbly. Webb switched to the proper dispatch frequency and keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Air 7. We have a situation. The suspect didn't survive the transport. Request guidance." There was a pause, and then a different voice came through, sharp and urgent. "Air 7, repeat your last transmission. The suspect fell from the aircraft during severe turbulence. We were unable to." "Air 7, what is your current location? What suspect are you referring to?" Webb gave their coordinates, his stomach sinking with each word. "Air 7, be advised. We have no record of you being assigned to suspect pickup. Your last logged activity was routine patrol in the downtown sector." Daniels grabbed the mic from Webb. "Dispatch, we received orders to apprehend an armed suspect near the river docks. Female, green tactical gear, involved in a warehouse shooting. We were following your instructions." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried the weight of terrible realization. "Air 7, we issued no such orders. The suspect you described matches the description of Sergeant Amira Cole, Homeland Security. She is friendly. Repeat, Sergeant Cole is one of ours. Return to base immediately for debriefing." The blood drained from Daniel's face. Webb made a choking sound, his hands trembling on the controls. They had just thrown a federal agent out of their helicopter. "We need to go back," Daniels said frantically. "Turn around. We need to search for her." But before Webb could respond, the hijacked frequency activated again, that cold, emotionless voice cutting through their panic. "Good work, Air 7. The problem has been eliminated. Return to base and report mechanical failure during the storm. No weaknesses, no complications." "Understood. Who is this?" Webb demanded. "Identify yourself." "I said no witnesses." The transmission ended with a click that felt like a death sentence. Webb and Daniel stared at each other, the full horror of their situation finally clear. They hadn't just made a mistake. They'd been used as weapons by someone operating inside the system, someone with access to police frequencies and enough authority to make them believe obvious lies. Miles away, Amira dragged herself through the marsh, her boots squelching in the mud with each step. She was soaked, bleeding, and every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but she couldn't stop. Not yet. She reached the edge of the marshland where dry ground began and spotted a small fishing dock jutting into a calmer section of water. An elderly man sat there, rain jacket pulled tight, a fishing rod in his weathered hands. He looked up as she approached, his eyes widening at the sight of her, covered in mud, hands cuffed, blood dripping from her wrist. "Miss, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" he asked, already reaching for his phone. "No," Amira said quickly, holding up her cuffed hands. "No hospitals, no police. But I need to borrow your phone. Please." The fisherman hesitated, clearly torn between helping and getting involved in something that looked very much like trouble. But something in Amira's eyes, some combination of desperation and determination, convinced him. He handed over his phone. Amira dialed her emergency contact, a direct line to her handler at Homeland Security. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Her jaw clenched. Either her handler was unavailable or someone had gotten to him first. She handed the phone back to the fisherman. "Thank you. You never saw me. Lady, you need medical attention. You're hurt." "I'll live," Amira said, and she meant it literally. She was alive when someone had wanted her dead, and that meant she had work to do. She stumbled away from the dock, heading toward a cluster of abandoned buildings she'd spotted earlier. The storm was beginning to ease, the rain settling into a steady drizzle. As she walked, she activated a tiny transceiver sewn into her belt buckle, a backup communication device she'd installed herself after too many missions with compromised equipment. The transceiver crackled to life, picking up encrypted radio traffic. She cycled through frequencies, listening to the chatter. Most of it was routine, patrol units responding to storm damage, but then she caught something else. A conversation on a private channel, military-grade encryption that her device barely managed to decode. "Confirm the package was delivered?" A voice asked. "Affirmative. The helicopter took care of it. No survivors expected," another voice replied. "Excellent. Continue with the original timeline. The next shipment moves at 0200. Shipment." The word triggered a memory. Amira's undercover mission had been tracking illegal arms moving through Los Angeles. Weapons that were being smuggled using legitimate police and government vehicles as cover. She'd been getting close to identifying the source when her communications went down and the helicopter found her. This wasn't random. Someone knew she was onto them, and they'd used the police to eliminate her. The corruption she'd been investigating went deeper than anyone had suspected, high enough to hijack police frequencies and order the execution of a federal agent. She reached the abandoned storage hangar as full darkness fell. The building was a relic from the dock's busier days, filled with rusted machinery and stacks of old crates. It provided shelter and, more importantly, invisibility. Amira found a relatively clean corner and collapsed against the wall, finally allowing herself to feel the pain. Her left side was a mass of bruises, her wrists still bleeding sluggishly, and her head pounded from the impact. But she was alive, and that was more than her enemies had planned for. She reached into her boot, past the hidden strap she'd used for the emergency chute, and pulled out a small waterproof capsule she'd sewn into the lining. Inside was a microdrive, barely larger than her thumbnail. She'd loaded it with evidence 3 days ago, files she'd copied from a police database that showed suspicious activity, deleted shipment records, edited patrol routes, and most damning of all, communication logs that had been scrubbed from the official records. This microdrive was the reason she'd been targeted. Someone knew she had it, or suspected she had evidence that could expose their entire operation. They tried to kill her to protect their secret. Amira held the tiny device up to the dim light filtering through the hangar's broken windows. It didn't look like much, but it was worth more than gold. It was proof, and proof was power. She allowed herself a small, cold smile. Let them think she was dead. Let them believe they'd won. She would use their assumption against them, working from the shadows, invisible and underestimated. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky one last time, illuminating her determined face through the grimy windows. She whispered to herself, a promise more than a statement. "They think I'm dead. Good. Time to make it count." She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to plan. Her enemies had made a critical mistake. They'd thrown her out of the sky, but they'd forgotten that soldiers like her didn't just fall. They learned to fly. Hours after surviving the fall, throwing her out of a helicopter had been improvised, a gift provided by the storm, and 2 officers too confused to question orders. Now she was dead, her reputation destroyed, and his operation could continue without interference. That evening, Amira made her move. She'd spent the day watching the 3rd District Precinct from a distance, noting shift changes and security patterns. She knew the layout well from previous coordination meetings between Homeland Security and local law enforcement. She also knew that their digital security was laughably outdated, designed more for public relations than actual protection. At 7 p.m., wearing a stolen janitor's uniform she'd taken from a laundromat donation bin, Amira walked through the precinct's side entrance. She kept her head down, pushing a cleaning cart she'd found in an alley behind the building. The 2 officers at the desk barely glanced at her. She made her way to the 3rd floor, to the records room, where older case files were stored alongside the servers that backed up daily reports. Her heart pounded as she passed officers in the hallway, but none of them looked twice at the janitor with her cart. Inside the records room, she locked the door and moved quickly to the server terminal. She pulled out the micro drive from her boot and inserted it into her palm-sized portable computer, then connected directly to the police network through an Ethernet port hidden behind a filing cabinet. The files on her micro drive contained encryption keys she'd acquired during her investigation. She used them now to access the communication logs from the past week, searching for any mention of helicopter operations, suspect apprehensions, or her own name. What she found made her jaw clench. The logs had been scrubbed clean, entire conversations deleted, timestamps altered to show nothing unusual. But the deletions themselves left traces, digital fingerprints that pointed to who had made them. Every deletion had been authorized by Lieutenant Ryan Hale. She dug deeper, following the trail through layers of security she probably shouldn't have been able to breach. What she discovered was a network of corrupted communications, messages rerouted through private contractors, frequencies hijacked, and returned so smoothly that no one noticed. And at the center of it all was Hale, coordinating shipments, authorizing payments, covering tracks. Amira downloaded everything she could find, copying files on her micro drive until it was nearly full. She found convoy schedules that matched weapons shipments, patrol routes that created security gaps in specific locations, and most damning of all, encrypted audio files of Hale giving orders to move packages through police channels. She just disconnected from a network when she heard voices outside the door. Two officers talking casually as they approached. She grabbed her equipment and ducked behind a tall filing cabinet just as keys rattled in the lock. "I'm telling you, something's not right about this whole Cole situation," one officer said as they entered. Amira recognized the voice, Jake Daniels. "Keep your voice down," his partner replied. "Marcus Webb, we filed the report. It's done." "Is it?" "Because I've been thinking about what she said about the radio frequency being wrong. I checked the logs, Marcus. We weren't on the right channel when we got those orders." Webb was silent for a moment. "Let go, Jake. We did what we were told. We threw an agent out of a helicopter. We followed orders during an emergency situation. The investigation will clear us." Amira watched them through the gap between cabinets. Daniels looked haunted, dark circles under his eyes. His uniform rumpled like he'd been wearing it too long. Webb looked tired but resolved, the kind of exhaustion that came from trying to bury guilt under layers of rationalization. "What if she was telling the truth?" Daniels said quietly. "What if someone set us up? Then there's nothing we can do about it now," Webb replied firmly. "Drop it. That's an order." They left, taking a file they'd come for, and the door clicked shut behind them. Amira waited a full minute before emerging from her hiding spot. Daniels was doubting the story, which meant he might be useful. But first, she needed to know more about him. She accessed the personnel files quickly, pulling up Daniels' record. Clean service history, several commendations, no disciplinary actions. He lived alone in an apartment in Glendale, no family nearby, had been with LAPD for 8 years. Most importantly, his recent case notes showed he'd been assigned to routine patrol duty with Webb for the past 3 months. Nothing that should have put him on Hale's radar. Which meant he'd been chosen specifically because he was clean, someone who would follow orders without question, but whose conscience might be manipulated afterward if things went wrong. He was a patsy, just like her. Amira finished her work and slipped out of the precinct the same way she'd entered, invisible in her janitor's disguise. But she left something behind, a message routed through the precinct's own system, addressed to Daniel's personal phone, sent through enough proxies that it would be untraceable. The message contained just one line: "You were used. Find a flight record from the day you picked me up. Then decide who's guilty." Back in his apartment that night, Daniel stared at the anonymous text message on his phone. His hands were shaking. He'd been trying to convince himself that everything was fine, that they'd followed proper procedure, but the message confirmed his worst fears. Against his better judgment, he accessed the LAPD database from his personal laptop and pulled up the helicopter flight records from that day. The official log showed a standard patrol route with a note about mechanical difficulties due to storm conditions. No mention of a suspect pickup, no mention of anything unusual. But when he checked the raw GPS data that was automatically logged by the helicopter's navigation system, he found something different. The actual flight path showed them deviating significantly from their patrol route, heading to the river docks, then moving out over the ocean, exactly as he remembered. Someone had edited the official record, but had forgotten about the GPS data. Or maybe they didn't think anyone would check. Daniels felt sick. The anonymous message was right. They'd been used, manipulated into doing something terrible, and now someone was covering it up. He thought about going to his supervisor, but what would he say? That he'd thrown someone out of a helicopter based on orders from a hijacked radio frequency? His phone buzzed again. Another message, this one containing a single number, a frequency. The same wrong frequency he remembered from that day. He grabbed his police radio and tuned it to that number. At first, there was only static, but then voices emerged, faint but clear enough to understand. Shipment confirmed for midnight. Route Gamma, police escort as arranged. Copy that. Is the Hale situation still secure? Affirmative. The Cole problem has been permanently resolved. No further complications expected. Daniel's blood turned to ice. These people were using police frequencies for criminal operations, and they'd mentioned Hale, Lieutenant Ryan Hale, one of the department's most respected commanders. And they'd mentioned Cole, talking about her like she was a problem they'd solved. He understood now. Amira Cole had been investigating this, had gotten too close, and they'd used him and Webb to kill her. And now they expected him to just go along with it, to keep his mouth shut and let them continue. His phone buzzed a third time. No words this time, just GPS coordinates. Daniels grabbed his jacket and headed out into the night. The coordinates led him to an abandoned airstrip on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that had been forgotten when newer facilities were built. He parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, staying in the shadows. What he saw made his stomach drop. Trucks with police markings were parked near an old hangar, but instead of police supplies, they were loaded with wooden crates stenciled with shipping labels. Men in tactical gear, not police uniforms, moved between the trucks and the hangar with military precision. Through the hangar's open door, he could see more crates, stacks of them, and someone inspecting the contents. Daniels pulled out his phone and zoomed in with the camera. The man supervising the operation was Lieutenant Ryan Hale. Daniels took photos, his hands shaking, documenting everything he could see. This was it, the proof that something deeply wrong was happening inside his department. But what could he do with it? Who could he trust? As if in answer, his phone buzzed with another message. Now you know. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The next morning, Daniels returned to work feeling like he was moving through a nightmare. Every superior he saw, every fellow officer, made him wonder, were they involved? How deep did this corruption go? He was in the locker room when his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, stepping into an empty hallway. Officer Daniels. It wasn't a question. The voice was female, calm, controlled. Who is this? Someone who's supposed to be dead. Thanks to you. His throat went dry. Sergeant Cole, meet me at Rosie's Diner on Sunset Boulevard. 1 hour. Come alone, and don't tell anyone. Your life depends on it. The line went dead. 60 minutes later, Daniel sat in a corner booth at Rosie's, a rundown establishment that had seen better decades. The coffee was terrible, but the location was perfect, far enough from the precinct that no one would spot him, busy enough that they'd blend into the crowd. Amira slid into the booth across from him. She'd changed since he'd last seen her falling from his helicopter, cleaner, hair pulled back, wearing civilian clothes that made her look like any other Los Angeles resident. But her eyes held the same intensity, and the bruises visible on her neck told the story of her survival. You're alive, Daniels whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Disappointed? No. God, no. I've been. He couldn't finish. The weight of what he'd done pressed down on him like a physical force. Amira pulled a small tablet from her bag and set on the table between them. I'm going to show you something, and then you're going to decide if you want to help me fix this or if you want to keep being a puppet. She played a video file. Daniels watched, his face growing paler with each second. It showed Lieutenant Hale at the airstrip, personally overseeing the transfer of weapons from police trucks to private vehicles. The audio captured him discussing payment schedules, shipment routes, and, most damning of all, instructions to handle the federal problem permanently. He's been smuggling military-grade weapons through police convoys for at least 18 months, Amira explained quietly. Using legitimate law enforcement operations as cover, blaming gang violence for any weapons that surface on the streets. I've been tracking this operation for 3 months, and I was close to exposing him when you picked me up. The helicopter, Daniels said hoarsely. That was him. He hijacked your radio frequency and fed you false information. Made you think I was a cop killer, so you do his dirty work without question. Then he tried to cover it up by destroying my reputation. She leaned forward. You were supposed to kill me and then disappear into the system. Just another officer following orders. But I survived, and that changes everything. Daniels looked at the photos he'd taken on his phone, then back at Amira. I sent these to myself. Evidence of what I saw last night. Good. We'll need it. She paused. I know what I'm asking. If you help me, you're putting yourself in Hale's crosshairs. He's already proven he'll kill federal agents. A local cop who betrays him won't last long. What do you need? Amira almost smiled. First, I need you to get me access to your evidence locker. Hale confiscated my badge and weapon after you picked me up. I want them back. That's impossible. The locker is monitored, logged, completely secure. Then you'll need to be creative. 2 hours later, Daniels triggered a fire alarm on the precinct's second floor. As officers evacuated according to protocol, he slipped into the evidence room through a side entrance, using his security clearance to bypass the lock. He found Amira's personal effects in a sealed bag, marked for destruction. He grabbed the bag and was halfway to the door when his partner stepped into the room. Jake, what are you doing? Webb demanded. Daniels froze. Marcus, I can explain. Can you? Because I've been watching you act strange all morning, and now I find you stealing evidence during an evacuation. Webb's hand moved toward his weapon. What's going on? The Cole case, Daniels said quickly. Something's not right about it. I've been investigating, and I found. Found what? Trouble? Jesus, Jake, I told you to let it go. Webb moved closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Whatever you think you found, you're wrong. Just put the bag back and walk away. I can't. You mean you won't? Webb's face hardened. They warned me you might do something stupid. Daniels felt his stomach drop. They? Lieutenant. He said you've been asking questions, getting too curious. He asked me to keep an eye on you. Webb pulled out his phone. I have to report this. Marcus, listen to me. Hale is dirty. He's running weapons through police channels, and he used us to kill a federal agent. Stop. Webb's voice was hard. Just stop. You're talking about a decorated lieutenant, a man with 20 years of service, and you're accusing him of what? Some conspiracy theory, because you feel guilty about following orders? It's not a theory. I have proof. Then show it to internal affairs through proper channels. Don't steal evidence and act like a criminal. Daniel saw the determination in his partner's eyes and made a choice. He rushed Webb, using techniques they'd both learned in training, going for the phone. They crashed into a shelf of evidence boxes, scattering files across the floor. Webb was stronger, but Daniels was more desperate. He managed to knock the phone away and throw Webb off balance, then ran for the door. Behind him, he heard his partner shouting for backup. He burst out of the evidence room and nearly collided with Amira, who'd been waiting in a maintenance closet nearby. She grabbed the bag from him, and together they ran for the parking garage. What happened? She asked as they sprinted down the stairs. My partner. He's working with Hale. They reached Daniel's personal car. He deliberately avoided using a police vehicle and peeled out of the garage just as officers emerged from the building behind them. Amira watched through the side mirror as Webb appeared at the garage entrance, his face a mask of anger and betrayal. That's going to complicate things, she muttered. You think, Daniel said, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I just assaulted my partner and stole evidence. My career is over. Your career was over the moment you threw me out of a helicopter, Amira said bluntly. The question is whether you want to go down as Hale's accomplice or the cop who exposed him. They drove in silence for several minutes before Daniel spoke again. Webb said Hale warned him I was asking questions, which means Hale knows I'm a problem now. Welcome to my world. Amira pulled her badge from the evidence bag, turning it over in her hands. It felt good to hold it again, to have proof of who she really was. The good news is we have evidence. The bad news is Hale knows we have it, which means he'll accelerate his timeline. What's his endgame? What's worth this much risk? Amira pulled up files on her tablet, showing shipping manifests and payment records she decoded. He's moving one final shipment offshore in 2 days, worth over $50 million in military-grade weapons. After that, he disappears. Early retirement to a country with no extradition, set for life. Can we stop it? We can do better than that. We can expose the entire network. She looked at him seriously, but it means going all the way. No backing out, no second thoughts. Once we move against Hale, he'll come at us with everything he has. Daniels thought about Webb's face, about the betrayal he'd seen there. His partner had chosen Hale over him, had chosen corruption over truth. Maybe that choice had been made months ago, maybe years. It didn't matter now. Tell me what you need, he said. That night, they set up a temporary base in an extended-stay motel on the edge of the city, paid for in cash using money Amira had withdrawn from an emergency account. She spread out everything they had: photos, files, audio recordings, testimony. It's compelling, Daniels admitted, but is it enough for an arrest? No, Amira said. We need the shipment itself. Physical evidence that directly ties Hale to the weapons. Right now, everything we have is circumstantial or could be explained away by a good lawyer. She pulled up a map showing the location of Hale's operation. The abandoned airstrip where the final shipment was being prepared. This is where we need to be. Document everything. Get clear footage of Hale with the weapons. Transmit it to federal authorities who aren't compromised. That's insane. His men will be everywhere. I know. Amira's eyes met his. That's why we need better access. We need to get inside the operation, close enough to see everything. Ow! She smiled grimly. By giving Hale exactly what he wants. We make him think he's won. The plan took shape over the next several hours. It was risky, maybe suicidal, but it was the only option they had. Amira would use herself as bait, letting Hale think she was making a desperate move to steal the weapons evidence. When he responded, they'd document his entire operation in the act of stopping her. He'll send his people to kill you, Daniels warned. I'm counting on it, but this time I'll be ready. She looked at the equipment they'd assembled, cameras, recording devices, weapons they'd acquired through channels Daniels didn't ask about. Everything they needed for one final confrontation. Outside the motel window, the city lights sparkled like fallen stars. Somewhere out there, Hale was planning his escape, confident that he'd eliminated every threat to his empire. He had no idea that the woman he'd tried to kill was alive, angry, and coming for him. Amira checked her weapon, the familiar weight of her service pistol comforting in her hand. Daniels watched her, seeing not the suspect he'd thrown from a helicopter, but the federal agent she'd always been, trained, determined, and absolutely relentless. One question, he said. When this is over, assuming we survive, are you going to forgive me? Amira didn't answer right away. She thought about the moment he'd pushed her, the terror of falling, the betrayal of being attacked by people who were supposed to be on her side. But she also thought about him checking the flight records, believing her warnings, choosing truth over comfort. Ask me when Hale's in handcuffs, she finally said. Until then, we're just two people trying to survive. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was honest. And for now, that was enough. They spent the rest of the night preparing, knowing that in 48 hours, they'd either expose the biggest corruption scandal in LAPD history or die trying. There was no middle ground, no safe option. But as Amira loaded her weapon and checked her gear, she felt something she hadn't felt since falling from that helicopter. Purpose. Hale had tried to destroy her, to erase her from existence. Instead, he created his own worst nightmare. A soldier with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. 2 days had passed since Daniels had chosen his side, and now they sat in a rain-drenched safe house, a basement apartment Amira had rented using a false identity. Water dripped steadily from a crack in the ceiling into a bucket in the corner, each drop marking time like a countdown. Spread across a makeshift table were blueprints of the police aviation hangar, stolen from municipal records through methods Daniels had learned not to question. "This is suicide," Daniels said, studying the layout for the 100th time. The hangar was a fortress designed to protect expensive aircraft and equipment. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out alive seemed laughable. Amira traced her finger along the blueprint's edge, where loading docks connected to the main floor. "Hale's moving the shipment tonight under the cover of disaster relief operations. The crates will be labeled medical supplies, loaded onto helicopters, and flown to a cargo ship waiting offshore." "How do you know the timing?" She tapped her tablet, showing intercepted communications she'd been monitoring through the frequency Daniels had discovered. "They're not as careful as they think. Hale's people use encrypted channels, but they're predictable. Same frequency, same time every night." Daniels leaned back, rubbing his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in days, jumping at every sound, convinced that Hale's people would find them. "Even if we get inside, even if we document everything, how do we get the evidence out? The moment they spot us, we're dead. We don't just document it," Amira said, her voice carrying an edge of steel. "We stop the shipment entirely. No weapons leave that hangar." "You mean hijack the helicopter?" It wasn't a question. He'd seen the determination in her eyes growing stronger each day. The way she checked and rechecked her weapon. The way she studied those blueprints like they held the secrets of the universe. "Reclaim it," she corrected. "That's my helicopter. My department's aircraft. Hale's been using police resources for criminal enterprise, and I'm taking them back." Before Daniels could argue, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "They know where you are. Move now." He showed Amira, who was already on her feet, grabbing their essential equipment. "Who sent that?" "Don't know, don't care. We move." They gathered what they could carry and left through the back exit, emerging into an alley slick with rain. Behind them, they heard the screech of tires, saw flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Hale's men or corrupt cops, or both. It didn't matter. They ran. 3 blocks away, breathing hard in the doorway of an abandoned store. Daniels finally spoke. "Someone's helping us." That warning gave us enough time. Amira was already on her tablet, typing rapidly. After a moment, a message appeared on screen. "Agent Rivera, your old mentor. She's been watching from inside. Couldn't act openly without compromising herself. Can we trust her?" She gave me the override codes for the helicopter autopilot. Amira showed him a file that had been transmitted to her secure server. "These will let us control any aircraft in the police fleet remotely." She risked everything sending these. Daniels processed this information. "So we really are going to steal a helicopter tonight, during the chaos of the shipment. It's our only chance." They spent the remaining hours of daylight preparing. Amira walked Daniels through the plan step by step, showing him how the autopilot override worked, explaining the timing, the risks, the dozen ways it could all go wrong. He listened, occasionally asking questions, but mostly trying to reconcile this reality with the simple patrol officer he'd been just days ago. As evening approached and rain began falling harder, they made their way toward the aviation hangar. They'd stolen mechanic uniforms from a laundry service, complete with ID badges doctored enough to pass a casual inspection. In the pockets of their coveralls, they carried small EMP devices, electromagnetic pulse generators that could disable electronics without causing permanent damage. The hangar loomed before them, massive and industrial, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that turned the rain into silver needles. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, but they were focused outward, watching for external threats. They didn't expect danger to walk through the front gate wearing employee uniforms. Amira and Daniels joined a group of actual mechanics heading in for the night shift, keeping their heads down, their body language casual despite the tension coiling in their muscles. The guard at the gate barely glanced at their IDs before waving them through. Inside, the hangar was controlled chaos. 3 helicopters sat on the main floor, rotors secured, cargo doors open. Men in tactical gear, not police uniforms, Amira noted, moved between the aircraft and a line of trucks backed up to the loading dock. The crates they carried bore Red Cross markings, but the way they handled them, the weight and care they took, told a different story. "There," Daniels whispered, nodding toward a raised office overlooking the hangar floor. Through the window, they could see Lieutenant Ryan Hale, dressed in civilian clothes, supervising the operation like a conductor leading an orchestra. Amira's jaw tightened. This was the man who'd ordered her death, who'd corrupted good officers and turned them into criminals, who'd used the badge as a shield for his greed. Tonight, that ended. They moved carefully through the hangar, blending in with the legitimate workers. Amira planted one of her EMP devices on the first helicopter's undercarriage, magnetic clamps holding it secure. Daniels did the same with the second aircraft while she moved toward the third, the one she planned to take. The third helicopter was the same model that had thrown her out days ago. She recognized the tail number, the small dent in the side panel, the way the pilot seat was adjusted. This was the exact aircraft. Poetic justice, she thought, climbing aboard while Daniels kept watch. She accessed the control panel, connecting her override device directly to the helicopter systems. Lines of code scrolled across her tablet as Rivera's program integrated with the aircraft's computer. It took 90 seconds, an eternity when discovery meant death. "Clear," Daniels whispered, but his voice was tight with stress. Amira finished the installation and climbed down, but as her boots hit the concrete, a guard rounded the corner of the helicopter. His eyes went wide, hand moving toward his radio. Daniels reacted instinctively, tackling the guard before he could call out. They hit the ground hard, wrestling for control. Amira moved in, delivering a precise strike to the guard's temple that left him unconscious but alive. "Go," she hissed at Daniels, dragging the guard behind an equipment crate. "Set your timer." Daniels pulled out the detonator for his EMP devices, hands shaking as he programmed a 15-minute delay. The EMPs would disable the other helicopters, prevent them from pursuing by them precious minutes. But the scuffle had drawn attention. Another guard appeared, this one faster on the draw. "Hey, stop right there." Alarms began to wail throughout the hangar, red lights spinning, and suddenly the controlled chaos became actual chaos. Hale's voice boomed over the PA system. "Lock down the hangar. No one leaves." Heavy doors began rolling shut on their tracks, cutting off the exits. Armed men converged from all directions, weapons drawn. Amira grabbed Daniels, and they ran for the helicopter, bullets sparking off the concrete behind them. "Start it up," Amira shouted, returning fire to cover their approach. Daniels hauled himself into the pilot's seat, his hands moving through the startup sequence with surprising confidence. 8 years of patrol flights, hundreds of hours in the air. Muscle memory took over where conscious thought failed. The engine whined to life, rotors beginning their slow rotation. Amira climbed in beside him, still firing at the approaching guards. One went down, then another, but there were too many. They needed to move now. "We're not ready for takeoff," Daniels yelled over the noise. "We don't have time to be ready." Amira yanked the collective up, and the helicopter lurched into the air, still underpowered, barely controlled. They rose awkwardly, the aircraft tilting as Daniels fought for control. Below them, Hale's men opened fire, bullets punching through the helicopter's thin metal skin. Warning lights blazed across the instrument panel. "We're hit," Daniels shouted. "Keep flying." Amira was already activating her EMP devices remotely. She triggered the charges, and below them, the other 2 helicopters sparked and died, their electronics fried. They crashed through the hangar's upper ventilation screens, glass and metal raining down as they burst into the night sky. The storm had intensified, wind buffeting them violently, rain reducing visibility to almost nothing. "Where?" Daniels demanded, wrestling with the controls. "Up, into the storm. They can't track us in this weather." Behind them, from the ground, Hale's voice crackled over the radio. "You're already dead, Cole. There's nowhere to run." The storm embraced them with furious intensity, wind shear tossing the helicopter like a toy. Lightning illuminated the clouds in brilliant flashes, and thunder shook the aircraft's frame. Daniels gripped the controls with white knuckles, every instinct screaming that they should land, that flying in these conditions was madness. But landing meant death, so he kept them aloft. "We've got company," Amira shouted, pointing at the radar display. 2 blips had appeared behind them, closing fast. Daniels checked the mirror, saw nothing but darkness and rain. Then another lightning flash revealed them. 2 helicopters, military grade, not police. Hale had called in his private contractors, mercenaries with better equipment and no hesitation about killing federal agents. The radio crackled, and Hale's voice returned, smooth and mocking despite the chaos. Still alive, Sergeant? I'm impressed. Should have stayed dead when you had the chance. Amira grabbed the radio mic. You're finished, Hale. Everything's been documented. Every shipment, every payment, every officer you corrupted. It's over. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one running for your life. His laugh was cold. My people are the best, Cole. They won't miss twice. Neither will I. She released the mic and turned to Daniels. Remember Rivera's override codes? We're about to test them for real. She activated her tablet, connecting to the pursuing helicopter systems through a backdoor in the police aviation network. The mercenaries might be flying private aircraft, but they were using police communication channels, police navigation systems, and those systems were vulnerable. Her fingers flew across the screen, inputting commands, overriding safeties. On her display, she watched as one of the pursuing helicopters' autopilot activated against its pilot's will, sending it into a controlled descent away from their position. One down, she muttered. One to go. But the second helicopter's pilot had realized what was happening and switched to manual override, cutting off her access. Worse, a targeting system locked onto them. These mercenaries had weapons far beyond what police helicopters carried. Incoming. Daniels yanked the stick hard left, and a missile streaked past them, close enough that they felt the heat. It detonated against a cloud formation ahead, the shock wave rocking them violently. Amira's tablet sparked and died, fried by the electromagnetic interference. We've lost the override capability. Then we do this the old-fashioned way. Daniels dove toward the ocean, using the darkness and the storm as cover. The pursuing helicopter followed, relentless. Its searchlight cut through the rain, sweeping back and forth, hunting. Another missile launched, and this time Daniels couldn't avoid it completely. The warhead grazed their tail rotor, and the aircraft immediately began spinning. Daniels fought the spin, using every technique he'd learned in emergency training. They lost altitude rapidly, the ocean rushing up to meet them. At the last possible moment, he managed to stabilize, leveling out barely 50 feet above the waves. "We can't take another hit," he shouted. Amira was already moving. She climbed out of her seat, making her way to the cargo door. Wind and rain lashed at her. As she opened it, the ocean's surface a dark blur below. "What are you doing?" Daniels demanded. "Giving them a target they can't ignore." She pulled a flare gun from the emergency kit and fired it directly at their pursuer. The bright red flare streaked through the storm, drawing the mercenary helicopter's attention. As the pilot adjusted his position to track the flare, Amira grabbed her service weapon and emptied the entire magazine at the helicopter's air intake. Most shots went wild, lost to the wind and rain. But one bullet found its mark, striking the engine's intake valve. For a moment, nothing happened. Then smoke began pouring from the engine, black and thick even in the storm. The mercenary helicopter began losing power, its rotors slowing. The pilot tried to recover, but at this altitude, in this weather, there was no time. The aircraft hit the ocean hard, breaking apart on impact, pieces scattering across the waves. The shockwave from the crash reached them, and Daniels fought to maintain control as debris peppered their own helicopter. A fragment of metal punched through their canopy, showering them with glass. "We're not going to make it," Daniels yelled. Their own helicopter was failing now, multiple systems damaged, fuel leaking, engine struggling. "Yes, we are." Amira crawled back to her seat, checking their position. "Head for the coordinates I'm sending you." "What coordinates?" "Just fly." She transmitted a location to their navigation system, and Daniels followed the indicator despite having no idea where they were going. They limped through the storm, barely maintaining altitude, praying the engine wouldn't quit before they reached safety. Below them, hidden in the darkness, something massive took shape. An offshore oil platform, abandoned years ago, now serving as the secret hub of Hale's smuggling operation. Lights blaze from its deck, and helicopters, real police helicopters this time, sat on landing pads. That's the distribution center, Amira explained, where the weapons transfer from police custody to private buyers. And right now, Hale is down there watching us die. We're not dying, Daniels said through gritted teeth. We're landing. He brought them in hard, too fast, the damaged helicopter protesting every inch of descent. They hit the platform's helipad with a bone-jarring impact that collapsed the landing skids. Metal screamed, sparks flew, but they were down and alive. Through the cracked windscreen, they saw armed men running toward them from all directions. Hale emerged from a control building, flanked by his personal security team. Even at this distance, even through the rain, they could see his expression, not fear, but fury. Out! Amira kicked open her door, hauling Daniels after her. They hit the deck rolling, came up with weapons drawn. The first guard to reach them went down from Amira's shot. The second fell to Daniels, who had finally embraced the reality that this was survival, not law enforcement. They weren't arresting anyone tonight. They fought their way toward cover, using the damaged helicopter as a shield. Bullets sparked off metal, punched through the aircraft's thin skin, but the wreckage provided enough protection to reach a better position, a storage container that would hold against small arms fire. We're trapped, Daniels yelled, reloading. No, Amira said, pulling out her phone. Despite the damage from the EMP, her backup communication system had survived. We're exactly where we need to be. She activated a program she'd set up days ago, a continuous broadcast sending their location and a distress signal to every law enforcement agency in California. More importantly, it was streaming video from her phone's camera, transmitting live footage of the oil platform, the weapons crates visible on the deck, and most damning of all, Lieutenant Ryan Hale, coordinating his mercenaries like the criminal kingpin he truly was. Every agency in the state is watching this right now, she said. FBI, DA, Homeland Security, even the media. Hale can kill us, but he can't kill the truth anymore. Hale must have realized what she'd done, because his voice boomed across the platform through a loudspeaker. Cease fire. Fall back. The shooting stopped. In the sudden quiet, broken only by wind and rain, Hale walked toward their position, hands raised to show he was unarmed. His men kept their weapons trained on the container, but held their fire. Clever, Sergeant, Hale called out. Very clever. But you've made one critical miscalculation. What's that? Amira shouted back. You think anyone cares about one corrupt cop? I'll be the fall guy, sure. They'll arrest me, prosecute me, make an example of me. But the operation continues. The network I built doesn't need me anymore. It runs itself. Then why fight so hard to stop me? Hale smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd already accepted defeat but refused to surrender. Professional pride. And because you're right about one thing, I don't belong up here. Neither do you. The difference is, I'm smart enough to know when the sky has fallen. He pulled something from his jacket, and for a moment both Amira and Daniels thought it was a weapon. But it was just a detonator, small and deadly in its simplicity. I've rigged this platform with enough explosives to sink it completely, Hale said calmly, along with every piece of evidence you're so proud of broadcasting. In 60 seconds, this place becomes an underwater graveyard, and everyone on it becomes a casualty of a tragic accident during a storm. Amira's blood went cold. You'll kill your own men. They're mercenaries. They know the risks. Hale's thumb hovered over the detonator's trigger. You wanted justice, Sergeant? Here it is. We all burn together, and the truth burns with us. Through the rain and darkness, they heard a new sound. Helicopter rotors, multiple aircraft approaching fast. Searchlights stabbed through the storm, illuminating the platform in harsh white light. FBI, drop your weapons. This platform is surrounded. Federal agents had arrived, drawn by Amira's distress signal, by her broadcast, by the evidence that could no longer be suppressed. But Hale's thumb pressed down on the trigger, and beneath their feet, the platform shuddered as charges began to detonate. Run! Amira grabbed Daniels, and they sprinted for the platform's edge as explosions ripped through the structure. Behind them, Hale's men scattered, some running for the helicopters, others just running. Hale himself stood motionless in the chaos, watching his empire literally crumble around him. As the platform tilted and began its slow descent into the ocean, he looked up at the FBI helicopters hovering above and raised his hands in surrender. But Amira wasn't watching Hale anymore. She was watching the ocean rising to meet them as the platform sank, knowing they had seconds at most to reach safety. Daniels was ahead of her, running for a rope ladder that dangled from an FBI helicopter, and she pushed herself harder, faster. The water was almost upon them when she leaped, fingers closing around the ladder's lowest rung. Daniels caught her wrist, hauling her up as the platform disappeared beneath the waves with a sound like the world ending. They hung there, suspended between ocean and sky, as FBI agents pulled them to safety. Below, the storm-tossed sea claimed Hale's operation, swallowing millions in weapons and evidence beneath its dark surface. But it didn't matter. The broadcast had done its work. The world had seen everything, and no amount of destruction could erase that truth now. The FBI helicopter carried Amira and Daniels away from the sinking platform, but she couldn't take her eyes off the churning water below. Somewhere in that dark ocean, evidence worth millions was disappearing, along with the weapons that had cost lives. But more importantly, Hale was still alive. She watched through the rain-streaked window as another FBI aircraft hovered near the platform's remains, agents rappelling down to secure survivors. Among them, she saw Hale being pulled from the wreckage, soaked and defeated but breathing. He was already in handcuffs, surrounded by federal agents. But something about his expression bothered her. He didn't look afraid. He looked resigned, like a man who'd made peace with an acceptable outcome. "Agent Cole," the FBI pilot's voice crackled through her headset. "We're taking you to a secure medical facility for evaluation. You've been through hell." "No," Amira said firmly. "I need to go back. Now." "Ma'am, with respect, the platform is compromised. It's going down. That's exactly why I need to go back." She leaned forward, urgency sharpening her voice. "Hale's planning something. He surrendered too easily." The pilot exchanged glances with his co-pilot. "Agent Cole, Lieutenant Hale, is in custody. Multiple agencies have eyes on him. Whatever he's planning, it's over." But Amira's instincts were screaming. She'd spent months studying Hale's operation, understanding how he thought, how he moved. A man that careful, that calculating, wouldn't just surrender without a contingency plan. The platform explosion had been a distraction, not his endgame. She pulled out her phone, miraculously still functional despite everything, and accessed the tracking program she'd installed days ago. When Hale's mercenaries had attacked her hideout and stolen her microdrive, she'd managed to plant a tracker on one of their vehicles. She'd been monitoring it ever since, watching it lead her to properties, accounts, connections. The tracker was active, moving rapidly, away from the platform, toward the mainland. "He's got an escape route," she said. "Someone's executing his exit plan right now." Daniels, who'd been silent since their rescue, finally spoke. "How can you be sure?" "Because that's what I would do. Leave yourself in FBI custody where you're protected by law, while your people secure your assets and arrange your defense. Hale's got lawyers, money, and connections we haven't uncovered yet. He'll plea bargain, turn witness against smaller players, and be out in 5 years with a new identity." The pilot's voice carried doubt. "The FBI won't let that happen. The FBI will try their best, but they don't know him like I do." Amira met Daniel's eyes. "We need to finish this. Not just arrest him. We need to take away every tool he has, every escape hatch, every backup plan." Daniels was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Tell us where to go." The pilot started to protest, but his co-pilot cut him off. "Sir, Agent Cole's broadcast has been verified by Homeland Security. She's got operational authority here." With reluctant approval, the helicopter changed course, following the coordinates Amira provided. They flew low over the coastline, the storm beginning to break, clouds parting to reveal patches of dawn sky. Below them, industrial complexes and shipping yards stretched along the waterfront. The tracker led them to an isolated helipad on the roof of a warehouse complex. As they approached, they saw exactly what Amira had predicted: a sleek civilian helicopter being loaded with cargo by men in tactical gear. No police markings, no official identification. This was Hale's private escape vehicle. "Take us down," Amira ordered. "Fast and loud. I want them to know we're coming." The FBI helicopter descended rapidly, its searchlight blazing across the rooftop. The men below scattered, abandoning their cargo to run for cover. But one figure stood still, watching their approach with calm assessment. Marcus Webb. Daniel saw his former partner and felt something twist in his chest. Marcus is running Hale's extraction. He's been Hale's second the whole time, Amira said. Think about it. He was perfectly positioned to monitor you, to report your doubts, to ensure the helicopter crew stayed in line. The FBI helicopter landed hard on the rooftop, agents pouring out with weapons drawn. But Amira was first out, moving toward Webb with single-minded purpose. Daniels followed, torn between duty and the remnants of friendship. Webb stood beside the civilian helicopter, his hand resting on the door handle. When he saw them, his expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, anger, and finally, bitter acceptance. "You should have stayed dead, Cole," he called out over the wind from the rotor blades. "So I keep hearing." Amira stopped 20 feet away, weapon drawn, but pointed at the ground. "It's over, Webb. Hale's in custody, the operation is exposed, and whatever you're trying to save here won't be enough." "You don't understand what you've destroyed," Webb said, his voice carrying a desperation that surprised her. "Hale was protecting people. The weapons we moved, they went to the right buyers, kept them out of terrorist hands. We were doing good work. By killing a federal agent, by corrupting cops, and stealing military weapons." Daniel stepped forward, his voice hard. "That's not good work, Marcus. That's crime dressed up as patriotism." Webb's laugh was hollow. "You're so naive, Jake. You think the system works? You think following the rules actually protects people?" Hale understood that sometimes you have to operate in the gray areas to do real good. "The gray area got a lot darker when you threw me out of a helicopter," Amira said coldly. "That was supposed to be simple. Clean." Webb's hand tightened on the helicopter door. "But you survived, and now everything's burning down, including people who didn't deserve it." "Your sister," Daniel said quietly, understanding flooding through him. "Hale's been paying for her treatment." Webb's face confirmed it. "Stage 4 cancer. Experimental treatments that insurance won't cover. Hale offered me a deal. Help him move some shipments, look the other way on certain operations, and he'd make sure she got the best care money could buy. So you sold out everything you stood for," Amira said, but her voice carried less anger now, more sadness. "For family. For the only family I have left." Webb pulled open the helicopter door, revealing bags of cash and documents inside. "This is enough to keep her in treatment for another year. Maybe 2 if I'm careful. That's all I want, Cole. Let me take this and disappear." "You've already won." FBI agents had surrounded the rooftop, weapons trained on Webb from multiple angles. He was trapped, and he knew it. But his hand moved toward his sidearm, and Amira saw the resignation in his eyes, the look of a man who decided he had nothing left to lose. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't make Daniels watch you die." Webb's hand froze. He looked at his former partner, saw the anguish in Daniels' face, and something in him broke. His hand moved away from his weapon, rising slowly in surrender. "I'm sorry, Jake," Webb said, his voice cracking. "For all of it." FBI agents moved in, cuffing Webb and securing the helicopter. They found exactly what Amira had expected: Hale's insurance policy, proof of payments to offshore accounts, documentation of every corrupt official he'd worked with, names and numbers that would unravel the entire network. As they led Webb away, he passed Daniels. For a moment, the 2 former partners locked eyes, years of trust and betrayal hanging between them like a physical weight. "She was worth saving," Daniels finally said. "But not like this. Never like this." Webb nodded, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I know." An hour later, Amira stood on the deck of a Coast Guard vessel, watching the sun rise over an ocean that had finally calmed. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and new. In the distance, she could see the oil platform's last pieces disappearing beneath the surface, the final chapter of Hale's empire closing. Her phone rang. Agent Rivera, calling from Homeland Security Headquarters. "You did it," Rivera said, her voice warm with pride. "Hale's confessing to everything, trying to cut a deal, but with your broadcast and Webb's evidence, prosecutors have him dead to rights. He's looking at life without parole." "Good." Amira felt the tension she'd been carrying for days finally begin to ease. "What about the network?" 23 arrests so far, including 4 high-ranking officers and 2 city officials. Your investigation broke open the biggest corruption case in California history. Rivera Post. How are you holding up? Amira looked down at her hands. They were steady now, no longer shaking with adrenaline and fear. "I'm still processing being thrown out of a helicopter." "Yeah, that's not in the standard training manual." Rivera's tone softened. "You know you don't have to come back to this. After what you've been through, if you want to walk away, no one would blame you." Amira thought about that option, about leaving law enforcement behind, finding some quiet life where helicopters were just aircraft and the sky didn't hold memories of falling. It was tempting, but she'd survived for a reason. She'd learned to fly after being thrown from the sky, had turned her near death into the weapon that brought down an empire. Walking away now would make it all meaningless. "I'll be back," she said firmly. "But I need some time first." "Take all the time you need, Sergeant. You've earned it." 3 weeks later, dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson as Amira stood on the ocean cliffs where she'd landed after being thrown from the helicopter. The marsh had dried somewhat, though evidence of her impact remained. A depression in the mud, broken reeds, the faint outline of her emergency chute caught on a rock formation. She'd come here every morning since the case closed, standing in this spot, feeling the wind that had tried to kill her now gently moving through her hair. The physical wounds had healed. Her wrist was scarred but functional. Her bruises had faded to yellow ghosts on her skin. The psychological wounds were taking longer. "Thought I'd find you here." She turned to see Daniels approaching, dressed in civilian clothes, looking more rested than the last time they'd spoken. The department had placed him on administrative leave, while Internal Affairs investigated his role in the operation. The consensus was that he'd been manipulated and had ultimately done the right thing. But bureaucracy moved slowly. "How's the investigation going?" she asked. "They cleared me yesterday. Officially." He stopped beside her, looking out at the ocean. "They're offering me my job back. Full reinstatement. Even a commendation for helping expose the corruption." "That's good. You deserve it." "Doi." His voice carried doubt. "I threw you out of a helicopter, Amira. I almost killed you." She was quiet for a long moment, watching seabirds well overhead. They'd had variations of this conversation several times now. Daniels seeking forgiveness she wasn't sure she could give. "You were manipulated," she finally said. "Hale used you, fed you lies, put you in an impossible situation. What matters is what you did after. You chose truth over comfort, justice over career. That takes courage. It doesn't erase what I did." "No," she agreed, "but it defines who you are. You're not the cop who pushed me. You're the cop who helped bring down the system that wanted me dead." She turned to face him directly. "Are you taking the job?" Daniel shook his head. "I can't go back to that helicopter, to those skies, and not think about what happened. So I'm transferring. Ground units, community policing. Something that keeps me connected to actual people instead of just watching them from above." "That's probably wise." She paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're staying in the job. The department needs good cops, especially now." "What about you?" "Rivera said you're coming back." "I am, but not to undercover work. I'm joining the training division." She smiled slightly. "Apparently surviving a helicopter ejection without a parachute makes me qualified to teach advanced survival tactics." Daniels laughed, the first genuine laughter she'd heard from him in weeks. "That's the most terrifying job qualification I've ever heard." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher, burning away the last remnants of dawn mist. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "Do you forgive me?" Amira considered the question seriously. Forgiveness wasn't simple, wasn't something you just decided and moved on from. It was a process, something you worked toward. I'm getting there, she said honestly. Ask me again in a year. Fair enough. He extended his hand. Thank you, Sergeant Cole, for giving me the chance to make it right. She shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, the sincerity in his eyes. Thank you, Officer Daniels, for taking it. He left after that, heading back to his new life, his new assignment. Amira stayed longer, letting the morning sun warm her face, feeling truly at peace for the first time since this all began. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Homeland Security. Assignment available if interested. High-profile case, federal jurisdiction. Your expertise requested. She read the details, her analytical mind already processing the information, seeing patterns and connections. It was the kind of case that would consume her for months, demand everything she had. She typed back, send me the coordinates. 2 days later, Amira stood in front of a classroom of Homeland Security recruits, watching them study her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. They'd all heard the story by now. The rogue agent who'd been thrown from a helicopter and had survived to expose the biggest corruption scandal in state history. Some of them looked at her like she was a legend. Others looked skeptical, wondering if the rumors were exaggerated. She waited for the room to quiet, then began. My name is Sergeant Amira Cole, and 3 weeks ago, 2 police officers threw me out of a helicopter at 3,000 feet. I'm going to tell you exactly how I survived, and more importantly, why it happened in the first place. She spent the next 2 hours walking them through the case, showing them how corruption spreads, how good people can be manipulated into doing terrible things, how systems fail, but also how integrity, persistence, and courage can overcome even the darkest circumstances. When she finished, a young recruit raised her hand. Sergeant Cole, when you were falling, were you afraid? Amira thought back to that moment, the wind tearing at her, the ocean rushing up to meet her, the absolute certainty that she was going to die. Terrified, she admitted. But fear doesn't mean failure. It means you're human. What matters is what you do with that fear. Let it paralyze you, or use it to make you sharper, faster, more determined to survive. Another recruit spoke up. The news said you're some kind of hero. Is that how you see yourself? No, Amira said firmly. I'm a soldier who refused to die when someone decided I should. I'm a federal agent who did her job even when it nearly killed her. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who fell and learned to fly. After the class ended, Amira walked outside to the training facility's helipad. A fleet of helicopters sat ready, their rotors still, waiting for pilots and passengers. She approached one, running her hand along its side, feeling the cool metal under her palm. Agent Rivera approached from behind. Heard your lecture went well. The recruits are sharp. They'll do good work. Speaking of good work, that assignment I sent you. Have you made a decision? Amira looked up at the helicopter, at the sky beyond it, at the endless blue that had almost been her grave. She thought about fear and courage, about falling and flying, about the choice to stay grounded or to reclaim the sky that had tried to kill her. I'll take it, she said. But I have one condition. Name it. I want helicopter certification. Full pilot training. If I'm going back up there, I'm going to be the one in control. Riveras Maïd. Already arranged. Your first lesson starts tomorrow. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Amira stood on the training facility's observation deck, watching helicopters take off and land. Each one rose into the air with confidence, their pilots skilled and certain, masters of their craft. Tomorrow, she would begin learning to do the same. She would master the machine that had been used as a weapon against her, would turn it into a tool of justice instead. She would reclaim not just her career, but her relationship with the sky itself. A young trainee approached, the same one who'd asked if she was a hero. Sergeant Cole, I just wanted to say what you did, surviving that fall, bringing down those corrupt cops. It's inspiring. It makes me want to be better. Amira turned to look at her, seeing the determination in her young face, the idealism that hadn't yet been tested by the real world. She remembered having that same look once, before helicopters and betrayal and falling through storm clouds. Then be better, Amira said gently. But remember, being better doesn't mean being fearless. It means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. It means falling and choosing to rise. Can you do that? The trainee nodded seriously. Yes, ma'am, I can. Then the sky belongs to you too. 6 months later, Amira sat in the pilot's seat of a police helicopter, her instructor beside her, running through pre-flight checks. Her hands moved with confidence now, muscle memory turning complex procedures into simple routine. She logged over 100 hours of flight time, earned her certification, and was now cleared for solo operations. Ready for your first solo flight? Her instructor asked. Amira looked out at the sky, at the clouds drifting lazily across the blue expanse. No storm today, no danger, just peaceful air and endless possibility. I've been ready, she said. She lifted off smoothly, the helicopter responding to her touch like an extension of her own body. As she climbed higher, she felt something shift inside her, the last piece of trauma finally releasing its hold. She wasn't the woman who'd been thrown from the sky anymore. She was the woman who'd learned to fly. Her radio crackled. Air 7, this is dispatch. We have a situation requiring aerial support. Are you available? Air 7. The same call sign as the helicopter that had thrown her out. She'd requested it specifically, wanting to reclaim even that small piece of her story. Dispatch, this is Air 7. I'm available. Send the coordinates. As she banked toward her assignment, the sun caught her helicopter's windscreen, turning it into a mirror of gold. In that reflection, she saw not just herself, but everyone who doubted her, everyone who tried to stop her, everyone who'd thought they could throw her away like trash. And she smiled, because some people fall to die, others fall to rise. And Sergeant Amira Cole had risen higher than anyone thought possible. The sky belonged to her now, and she was never letting go. When the people sworn to protect you become the ones hunting you, when the badge becomes a weapon and the sky itself turns into your enemy, how far would you fall before you learn to fly? If this story of corruption, survival, and redemption moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove the human spirit is stronger than any storm.